Hey everyone, I am back. That's right, we're back with Ask Shane Anything to cap off the week. I have returned from my... at this point, if I'd even call it a vacation. I'm not going to go into too many details here on Ask Shane Anything, but my trip home for Labor Day weekend was not much of a vacation, honestly. It was good to get away for a little while and good to see friends and some family, but I ended up having a crazy trip, and again, I'll get into that a little bit more on Game Face on Tuesday. But I am back in operation, getting ready for NFL opening weekend. For all of you that celebrate, I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'm just going to say personally off the top here, I have never been more discouraged for the Steelers before the season started since like the 80s when they were bad, like really bad. I really have low expectations for the Steelers this year. Their offensive line is a disaster. Anyway, you guys don't care about that stuff. But for the few of you that do, happy NFL opening weekend. This show happens because some of you guys are pledging at $7 or more per month at patreon.com/SIFTD. Now, everyone who even pledges at our $4 tier gets to watch the show. They get to ask questions, but we do try to prioritize those of you who are pledging at those higher tiers to get your questions into the show. Please go and ask some questions for the show so we can make sure we have more for next week. There's a little link in the header at sifted.net that'll take you to our forums where you can ask me literally about anything. I'm back in LA. I'm back in the groove. Let's do it. Okay, our first question this week comes from Derek D111. Why haven't other games made use of the Nemesis system from Middle-earth, Shadow of War, and Shadow of Mordor? I can count 15 games over the last few years that would have been better with it. I remember that there's a stupid patent for it, but it should be easy to get around. Okay, Derek, this one's a little more complicated than a lot of questions for Ask Shane Anything. I'm going to do my best to answer it off the top of my head without doing any research. Maybe I should do some research. But anyway, I guess the first thing I would say is that I don't think the Nemesis system is as simple and easy to replicate without breaking the patent as you might think. And it's also a big risk to try to build a game around that concept if there's a chance the game could be taken off the market because it broke a patent or something like that. So there's a lot of things going on here. The first thing I'm going to say, though, is that for the people who don't know what the Nemesis system is, it is this thing where the NPCs in the game remember you. They remember things that you did to them. So say you shoot an orc with an arrow, like later on in the game, the orc will say, he shot me with an arrow and now I'm about to get my revenge. And I will say this, I'm kind of trivializing it. It is really awesome. That system really caught me off guard a bunch of times, like way later in the game when it would call back stuff that I did way earlier in the game. It's really cool, and I understand why you're like, man, I wish that was in more games, because let's be honest, NPCs are something that hasn't changed much in a really long time in video games, and I think a lot of developers are leaning towards using AI to handle that stuff instead of something more creative, and in all honesty, a little more difficult to create than the Nemesis system. So I think the barrier of entry there is that it's a big risk. You can try to skirt around the code that's in the patent and try to pull the same thing off, and maybe you do. But if you get sued and they go to court, how tech savvy do you think that jury or judge might be? Do you think they're really going to understand the nuances that make it different in your game versus what they did in the Middle-earth games? Chances are pretty slim, so that's a pretty big risk, man. Like, if you're trying to incorporate that into your game, you better talk to a lot of lawyers before you do it, and they better understand technology as well. So I think there is a little bit of a language barrier, if you want to call that, when you go through the courts, when you're dealing with stuff that's really only the tech savvy really understand. I mean, I would argue that a lot of people watching this probably don't really understand exactly what it is or how hard it is to implement. So it was a groundbreaking feature, and I know we generally frown upon trying to patent or copyright creative ideas, and usually it doesn't work. There's been a few exceptions in the past. I don't know if you remember or not, but Namco at one point patented the ability to play mini games during a loading screen. Now, awarding that patent to Namco was a huge mistake. Like, it's such a simple thing that pretty much anybody could do it. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, I came up with the idea first, and therefore I'm going to patent it, and not that, like, we've created this process that makes it work that other people can't replicate. Other people were easily able to replicate. mini games during loading screens. So it's a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison related to this, but not really. And what happened there was that like the patent lasted for a while, and developers were just like, you know what? It's not worth the risk to put the mini games in our loading screens. I think it was, if you look at the cost benefit analysis there, are you going to put your game over the top by having mini games in the loading screen? Probably not. And now we don't even have loading screens, so the patent's kind of irrelevant anyway. So that was something that was easy to implement, but not something that a lot of developers would want to do. Now, in the case of the Nemesis system, I think they do want to do it, and I think they would want it in their games, but it's very hard and complicated to create, and so I just think it makes people nervous, because again, they're trying to dance around the patent and the codes that's in the patent and all that. I just think it's way too messy. But I do agree with you that there are a lot of video games. In fact, almost every video game at this point will be made better by having that awesome Nemesis system. And the sad truth is that, like, I don't think we'll ever get another game with it, because it doesn't look like WB is open to using its own patent in its other games. At least it hasn't appeared that way over the last several years. So I feel like it's a really cool feature that may just end up dying on the vine. Okay, next up we have a question from someone who always asks great questions for Ask Shane Anything, and that, of course, is Kevin. If you were in Phil Spencer's shoes and had to steer Xbox in a profitable direction for the next console generation, what would you do? Would you kill Game Pass, keep releasing games for PlayStation, buy more studios, or pay for more third-party exclusives? Well, the first thing I'm going to say, Kevin, is that although we don't know for sure, based upon extrapolating the finances and some of the statements coming out of Xbox and Microsoft, I actually think that Xbox is profitable as it is right now. And I do think that that is in large part to Game Pass and having that recurring revenue. I mean, Pachter always talks about 200 million subscribers or whatever. Even at 30 million subscribers a month, at $20 a month, that is a huge amount of money that is coming in every month. So I do believe that because of Game Pass, Xbox is profitable, or pretty close to it at the very least. Now, I think if you looked at the old model of selling consoles and then selling your exclusives, the whole Razer and Razer Blade model, I think it would be failing miserably. But I do think that this shift to Game Pass is at least guaranteed profitability for now for Xbox inside the Microsoft ecosystem. So I just want to get that out there first. Like, I don't think anyone coming in after Phil Spencer would have to make Xbox profitable. I think they're there already. Now, let's just say that they weren't profitable, and you're asking me, like, what are the smarter changes to maximize profitability or generate more profit for Xbox? I'm just going to take these one by one as you presented them. The first thing you asked is, would you kill Game Pass? No, I absolutely would not kill Game Pass. Game Pass is the one thing I would leave there for sure. Now, would I tweak the tiers and the pricing of it and trying to figure out, like, if we can get the streaming option in a really cheap monthly packet? Would I do stuff like that? Would I maybe lower the price back down to like $16? I would. I think some of the recent changes to Game Pass have been a mistake. So I would maybe rescind some of that stuff, but I would not ditch Game Pass. If you ditch Game Pass, then Microsoft is basically starting at ground zero again, and I don't think that that is a path to continued success for Xbox. So I would not do that. Your next one is, would you keep releasing games for PlayStation? Absolutely. In fact, I would not just keep releasing games for PlayStation. I would release games for everything. Switch, PC, mobile, PlayStation, all of it. I would just go completely third party with all my software. I would just pull a Sega. You didn't ask, like, get out of the hardware business, but that is exactly what I would do. I would stop making Xboxes. The R&D alone, and again, I do know we're dealing with Microsoft here, where even $1 billion can sometimes seem like a rounding error, but just the R&D for the next console, and maybe they've already spent it, I don't know, probably, is billions of dollars. Just the R&D. And then to get the manufacturing facilities set up and start manufacturing them, it is such a huge cash outlay. And at this point, do we need Xbox hardware? Is it any better than PlayStation hardware at this point? It's not. Does it do anything creative or unique that, like, Nintendo doesn't do anymore? No. Now, when this generation started, there were things like being able to, like, start your game up where you left off and things like that seemed really cool, and then you realize that they were mostly frivolous and not really that big of a deal. So I don't really see Microsoft innovating in the hardware space anymore. It's basically just like, a PlayStation with a different logo on it. So I know Microsoft Xbox fans, it hurts to hear this, but I would get out of the hardware business altogether. What good is it doing Microsoft right now? Your next question, would you buy more studios? No. I think Microsoft has plenty. I mean, one thing we're seeing now, we saw yesterday, there was a report out of PlayStation where an exec was like, man, we don't have enough IP. And he's right. PlayStation does not have enough IP. Microsoft does. There's no shortage of IP under the Microsoft umbrella right now. It's more of a matter of having enough studios to actually make games that are good based on that IP. And I do think now, after these purchases, they should have enough talented studios to pull that off. So buying more studios, let's put a hold on that for now. If things get really good in 5 years, then maybe you go through another buying spree. But for right now, I think Microsoft has plenty of studios to create great games from the mountain of IP that it now owns. And your last question was pay for more third-party exclusives. I think maybe for Game Pass, if they follow the rest of my plan here, then that might be a smart strategy, because you're going to need more content for Game Pass if that is really your sole business driver, other than selling your first-party games on all platforms. So I would say, yes, if you follow the rest of my plan, you probably will need to money hat a few third-party publishers to get more exclusive games on Game Pass going forward. Because again, my model is ditch hardware, go third-party, release games for every platform, but just keep Game Pass going and maybe invest even more in Game Pass. And again, tweak those tiers and that pricing structure so that the streaming stuff is a little more accessible for casuals. There's a lot of stuff that they can do with the existing products that they already have. So I do think that maybe not next generation, but the one after is going to be a very transformative time for Xbox, because I believe even if Microsoft comes out with another console, which it says it is, and it is crazy powerful, and maybe even more powerful than PlayStation 6 or whatever, I still don't think that Microsoft has a pathway back to selling more hardware than PlayStation or Nintendo. I just don't see a path there anymore. So I think it's time for Microsoft to rip off the Band-Aid, go third party, release its games for every platform possible, make some tweaks and some changes to Game Pass, maybe get some more exclusives on Game Pass to entice people to do it, and then reap the rewards. Okay, our next question comes from Gino Mike 1. I like making sandwiches. I'm always experimenting with ingredients and preparation methods. I even make my own spreads. Do you like sandwiches? What's your favorite sandwich? What's your greatest sandwich creation? Gino Mike, if you don't like sandwiches, you're not American. And honestly, I don't even know if you are American. You may be from Europe, I don't know. But the sandwiches as American is apple pie, hot dog, Chevrolet, and baseball. And I do love sandwiches. I mean, it's a perfect creation. How could you not like sandwiches? So I am a big fan. My favorite sandwich, as far as like any on the planet, man, that's hard to say. But I would say the sandwich that I buy the most often is tri-tip sandwiches. And tri-tip is a style of barbecue meat. It is, in my opinion, the most delicious, tender, juicy beef that you could ever eat. And you have to have somebody cook it who knows how to cook it. And if they make it right, it is incredible. And my wife and I, a lot of times on Friday night, it's my cheat day where I'm allowed to eat red meat. I had to stop that a couple years ago due to medical issues. And so when we got to barbecue restaurants, instead of getting like a big rack of ribs or a big plate of meat or whatever, I get a tri-tip sandwich, because I get tri-tip, which I love very much, in a sandwich, and it's also cheaper than just buying the plate of tri-tip. So that is my favorite sandwich. Any meat sandwich, ham sandwiches, I can't eat ham at all anymore. Ham is the absolute worst thing that you can ever eat if you have high cholesterol. And second place is hot dogs. Is hot dog a sandwich? Because you have the meat with the two pieces of bread on each side. That's the eternal debate, whether a hot dog is a sandwich or not. If it is, I also like hot dogs. I really can't eat those at all anymore. Now, as far as what's my greatest sandwich creation, when I was young, in like 5th, 6th, 7th grade, we were poor, man, like really poor. Like my parents had divorced and my dad had lost his job and was struggling for a little bit. We had no money and we had like no food. And so I would make the craziest sandwiches to go to school every day. And I would go to school and I would lie to try to hide that we were poor. I would say, oh, I like this sandwich. But really what I was doing was like trying to make sandwiches out of anything that we had in the refrigerator, so I would have something to eat for lunch. That's how bad off we were. And so I would make crazy stuff like I would put like ketchup with bologna with like some weird kind of cheese and then put like lettuce on it. And I would go to school and eat that, and people would look at me like I was crazy, and I'd be like, oh, I like it. This is my my bologna and ketchup sandwich, and I didn't like it. I just had nothing else to eat. So those were probably my craziest sandwich concoctions that I've had throughout my life, but it wasn't because I wanted to, it was because I had to. Okay, here's a bonus question for you for this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything. Nobody asked for this, but I'm going to offer it up as a public service announcement. You've been seeing all the reviews for Astro Bot over the last couple days. It is as of right now, the highest reviewed game of 2024. And you're probably wondering, is that legit? Is that real? Are those scores right? And you may not want to wait until Tuesday for us to share our opinions on the game, which we will. And look, I don't want to ruin our impressions that we're going to deliver to you guys for Game Face on Tuesday. And I want to talk about the details of the game with Matt, because I feel like that's the best way to discuss things with somebody else who has played it. But again, I know some of you guys are wondering if these scores are legit, and I just want to say to you, they are. So if you're looking for something to play this weekend before Game Face on Tuesday, and you're like, man, I know Shane loves 3D platformers. Man, I really want to hear his opinion on this game. I'm just going to tell you right now that you should buy it and play it this weekend, and I don't think you're going to regret it. Again, I don't want to go into a bunch of details, but I do know that some of you guys aren't football fans, and you don't have your whole weekend mapped out watching football this weekend, and you may be looking for a game to play. And I just want to say that the reviews for Astro Bot are not out of the realm of possibilities. It is legitimately really, really good. I love 3D platformers, and it takes a really good one to really trip my trigger, and this game is tripping my trigger. So if you're wondering if you should pick it up and you already kind of like games like this, you're okay with games that look like they're made for kids, or kiddie, as they used to say back in the late 90s, I don't think you'll regret picking up Astro Bot. It'd also be great to have somebody else who played it in our chat on Tuesday to also jump into the discussion. So if you're on the fence, you don't know if you should believe the reviews, I think you should probably go pick it up, and I don't think you're going to regret it. Okay, that's it for this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything. I am back from vacation and settling back into the grind. I want to thank everybody who is pledging at that $7 a month tier or higher. That's why this show happens. Technically, our Patreon isn't even at the amount where I'm supposed to be doing this show, but you guys have shown so much desire for this show with your pledges, with your money, that I wouldn't feel right not doing it. And plus, I really like doing it. Now, we do need more questions from you guys. If you guys wonder why Kevin has a question in every episode, and they're great questions, don't get me wrong, or some of the other people are constantly in the show, it's because the rest of y'all are not going and asking questions. If you go and ask questions and you aren't somebody who has asked a lot of questions, chances of you getting in the show are pretty darn good. So again, go to sifted.net, go to the header, click the link there, go to our forums, ask me a question. You can ask me literally about anything. If you like this show, head to patreon.com/sifted. Give us a pledge for just $4 a month. You get all our content early. Game Face 4 days early, Pactor Factor a week early, all our other content at least 3 days early, including this show, which is more like 4 or 5 days. So you really get your money's worth if you are a patron of ours. We do not put something up for our patrons and then the next day put it up free for everybody else. That really seems to be kind of what's happening lately with a lot of gaming Patreons, and we don't do it. We make sure we give value to our patrons. So thanks again to everybody. It's good to be back. We'll see you guys for Game Face on Tuesday.